They say tradition holds families together, but in Boston, I learned that it can also crack them wide open. My mother in law had a particular knack for humiliation, polished like silverware, cold as the winter wind that swept the streets outside our brownstone. That Thanksgiving morning, I moved through the kitchen with the precision of a surgeon, each potato peeled with care, each turkey breast seasoned as though the slightest imperfection would be a sin. You know, I really thought love meant respect. I thought it could shield you from petty cruelty. I was wrong. The house smelled of cinnamon and rosemary, of bread rising gently in the oven. The light through the tall windows fell across the marble countertops, casting soft shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. I set the table meticulously, napkins folded in crisp triangles, polished silver shining faintly, candles aligned in a straight line. The air vibrated with the hum of anticipation, a quiet electric current beneath the domestic calm. When she arrived, all smiles and feigned sweetness, her perfume too strong for a quiet room, she lingered at the doorway. "Oh dear," she said, her voice a song of politeness laced with subtle malice. "I do hope the kitchen hasn't overwhelmed you. Thanksgiving is such a task, isn't it?" Her eyes, however, were small, calculating, flicking over every detail as if each was a flaw she had been trained to find. I smiled politely, nodding. Turns out, karma has a sweet tooth, and patience, I had aplenty. She moved closer, peering at the turkey with a tilt of her head that suggested a critique invisible to polite society. "Darling, don't you think the skin could use a bit more golden?" she whispered, loud enough for the chef behind her to catch every syllable. My hands paused mid-brush of butter. My heart slowed. The others around the table didn't yet notice. They were lost in small talk, in wine, in the gentle, deceptive warmth of familial laughter. I continued, slow, deliberate, each motion precise. My mind catalogued every slight, every glance, every thinly veiled smirk. I remembered last Christmas when she swapped the sugar for salt in the trifle. How my husband laughed politely while I swallowed humiliation like medicine. And now, here she was again, mocking, elegant, predatory. And I had a plan. You see, revenge isn't a firework. It's a slow burn, a weaving of shadows beneath the light. I lifted the silver platter with the turkey, its skin glistening like bronze under the autumn sunlight. I moved with purpose, setting it before her, and smiled, an unremarkable smile, easy on the lips, deadly in the mind. "I hope you enjoy it," I said softly, voice calm, polite. Beneath it, the ice in my veins hummed. She tasted first. The edges of her mouth twitched in anticipation, a professional critic ready to savor failure. Then the first bite hit. Her eyes widened imperceptibly. She coughed politely. The table was silent, waiting. The hum of the overhead chandelier seemed louder. The moment stretched, the secret ingredient, subtle, meticulous, invisible to the untrained eye. A hint of a rare spice one she had once mocked in passing at a dinner party whispered through the roast. It danced over her tongue and her facade faltered. A cough, a slight color change. I could see the panic in her blink, tiny but unmistakable. She did not scream. Not yet. That would come later. She paused, placing the fork down as though it were a grenade. My husband, oblivious, smiled, complimenting the aroma. "It smells incredible," he said. And then, slowly, I saw her hand shake. Just a fraction. Enough. I remember thinking about the past year, all the quiet slights, the undermining comments, the subtle diminishment of my presence. I thought of the whispers behind my back, the stories she spun at brunches and dinners. You know, I really thought she could never be bested in her own house. But she underestimated one thing: precision, elegance, the art of subtle revenge, and the thrill of watching it unfold like a perfectly staged play. I leaned back slightly, hands folded, expression serene. The calm, before the storm. My mother-in-law tried another bite. Her lips tightened, a whisper of something. Irritation? Shock? I couldn't yet name. And then the phone buzzed discreetly on the sideboard. A single message timed perfectly. I didn't flinch. She glanced at it. A flash of recognition. Panic. It was subtle, almost polite, but I saw it. I always see. And then the rest of the family noticed. One by one, the realization dawned. The sweet, mocking matriarch of our table had underestimated me entirely. I let the scene linger. Delicate, elegant. My revenge was not loud. It did not break dishes or hurl accusations. It was cleaner, more precise, like frost etching glass at dawn. And as she rose from her chair, I caught a glance of fear, just for a second, before the mask fell back into place. The room hummed with polite conversation again. The candles flickered, the golden turkey gleamed, and in that calm I understood something crucial. Power is subtle and patience absolute. I watched her retreat to the living room, her posture stiff, every movement deliberate as if she could arrange the space around her into some semblance of control. She sank into the velvet armchair, hands folded over her knees, and for a fleeting moment, the mask slipped. A flash of uncertainty, a hesitation I had cultivated through years of subtle observation. I poured the wine with the precision of a ritual, the glass catching the light in a prism of red and amber, and I offered it to her with a smile that meant nothing. Polite, serene, deadly. The conversation around the table continued, polite chatter about football scores and distant cousins, but my ears caught everything. The barely audible sighs, the tiny shifts in body language, the clink of cutlery that didn't quite reach the plate. My husband, blissfully unaware, praised the meal again, noting the perfect balance of flavors. I could see her lips twitching, the forced calm she tried to project cracking at the edges. After dinner, she lingered by the fireplace, stirring the embers with a neat poker, pretending to examine the flames, while I busied myself in the kitchen, clearing plates with deliberate slowness. Each glass I polished, each fork I set aside was a calculated gesture. The scent of rosemary lingered, mingling with the faint scent of her perfume, still clinging despite my subtle interventions. And then, almost imperceptibly, she glanced toward the kitchen doorway, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. I remembered the year she had mocked me, subtly undermining everything I had done. The holidays ruined, the trivial insults at dinner parties, the helpful advice that always came with a side of condescension. I remembered the time she had told my husband that my work wasn't good enough, the way she whispered stories that painted me as naive, incapable. I had tolerated it all, smiling, nodding, pretending. But patience had its limits, and I had spent months preparing. I carried the dessert tray to the living room, placing each slice of pumpkin pie and cranberry tart with ceremonial care. She watched, pretending interest, but her eyes betrayed her. I had added a subtle ingredient to the pies, something only she would recognize. A hint of the spice she had once dismissed at a dinner party, mocking it openly in front of my friends. A tiny rebellion, invisible to everyone else. When she bit into it, I saw the almost imperceptible recoil, the way her fingers tightened around the fork. Delicious, isn't it? I asked softly, leaning against the doorway, watching her carefully. My voice was calm, polite, controlled. She nodded, too quickly, swallowing hard. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sipped slowly, enjoying the quiet power of the moment. It was subtle, elegant, perfect. Later, as the family drifted away to watch a football game or chat in the sitting room, I found her alone by the window. The light of the street lamps painted her face in sharp angles, casting shadows that made her look older than she claimed. I approached, steps measured, silent. "You see," I said softly, almost conversationally, "sometimes elegance is the sharpest weapon." She looked up, eyes wide, a mixture of comprehension and fear. She did not speak. She could not. The balance of power had shifted, imperceptibly yet irreversibly, and I, calm, serene, allowed a quiet smile. Weeks later, during a quiet moment when the house seemed to hold its breath, I received a letter slipped under the kitchen door. No signature, only a single line. You've changed everything, and yet the real test has just begun. I smiled faintly, tracing the words with my fingers. The game, it seemed, had another layer, one I had anticipated, one I had prepared for. That night, I watched her from the hallway as she slept, peaceful finally, yet haunted by the subtle terror of knowing she had been bested without a single raised voice. The twist, the quiet revelation she would carry like a shadow, was that the humiliation had not been just for show. It had been a mirror. Every insult she had ever dealt, every tiny act of manipulation, reflected back upon her, and she understood it. The weight of it would linger, elegant, cold, invisible to the untrained eye, but undeniable in its effect. I walked through the empty rooms, the lingering scent of spices and wood smoke around me. I touched the silverware set meticulously on the table, polished to perfection. I allowed myself a breath of satisfaction. Slow, deliberate, and infinitely private. The subtle choreography of patience and precision had yielded its outcome. She had been undone not by anger or exposure alone, but by the elegance of a quiet, methodical mind that knew exactly when and how to act. The final lesson, as I understood it in that silence, was simple. Power is not in the shout nor in the drama. It is in the quiet mastery of moments, in the patient orchestration of truths, and in knowing that elegance can cut sharper than rage ever could. If stories like this linger with you, stay. There's always another secret waiting to be told. Subscribe and let's uncover them, one confession at a time.